This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, go out, Jack. 1 second, I'm just encouraging my son to go watch his brother. Go, we're just starting. So thank you, everybody. Welcome to the July 7th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Today's agenda is to go over and essentially have a meeting amongst the Board of Selectmen and folks that are here to talk about our fiscal year 2021 priorities. And the thinking here and the idea here was to, get us all together at the start of a new year and discuss not only objectives for the year, but also I'd love to, get to a point, and we don't necessarily have to do it today, but at least start the conversation and so that we can map out, I'd say at least the next 3 months with some level of certainty, the next 6 months with, some certainty, but less certainty, and, the next 2 or 3 meetings with absolute certainty in terms of the agendas, so that we're not just sort of going meeting to meeting, coming up with agendas. We can take our priorities, put them in order, and then map out at which meetings we plan to address them. We'll obviously be flexible, as needed, of course. That's to be expected, but I feel like if we can plan a little bit further out than maybe we have in the past, that it will help us to be more transparent, not only in what we're trying to accomplish and some greater perspective and information as they look for doing, but it will also give the public more ways to engage. What we just to this that we brainstormed and thought of new ideas. We put them all in a list, which Derek will share in a moment. We want to do 2 things today as part of this workshop, but again, it's an open. Just initially do a very quick scan of the list so that we can orient ourselves to what's on there without really any discussion of what's on the list, except maybe some clarification of what it is. We can then, Maureen and Steve, make sure that we're reflecting your objectives for the year and that they're reflected and we haven't missed anything. And again, if we come up with something after this meeting, obviously we'll insert it, we'll figure it out. This is a living, breathing process. Once we have reviewed the list, gotten the input, Maureen, from you and Steve, then I think we can pick out, I'd love to pick out the top 5 priorities, say, and at least focus on those in terms of getting them slotted over the next couple of meeting agendas. So with that,
You're breaking up, Brett.
Yeah, just so you know, Brett, your screen is freezing and we can hardly hear what you're saying.
This is the first time we've done anything like this. So
Still can't hear you just yet.
you guys have suggestions, we should talk about what we think makes the most sense. I can't. Hello?
We can see you, we can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Maureen, can you hear Brett?
You're breaking up and the screen is freezing on you.
Okay. Is this any better?
Yes.
Derek, can you hear me? All right. Let me just check one thing. Let me turn this off. All right. I just turned off my Wi-Fi, so and I'm switching to cellular. So does that make any difference? Can you guys hear me now?
That's
Yes.
much more clear from what I can hear.
Okay. All right, good. Well, that was my fantastic introduction. Any questions?
If you want to repeat the last minute of that, I think we'd have it.
Did you? Okay, that's so basically, you know, let's look through the list of items. Let's make sure, Maureen and Steve, your items are reflected in there. Once we have all the items listed, let's pick out the top, 5 or so and just map those out over the next few meetings to make sure that we've got those slotted, and then we'll go from there. And again, I think that we'll talk about this, maybe put it on an agenda once a month or something, just to review the list, see if we've come up with anything new or want to adjust or plan a meeting or two out. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
So Derek is going to share the list that we've come up with. So I think the intent here will be to read through these just quickly so that you all can see what's here. And then we will, Steve, Maureen, ask for you guys to add anything else that you think is missing. And then we can pick out the top 4 or 5. So Derek, do you mind just walking us through what's here?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I'll just go through this list and just read it off for everybody here. Financial reserve policy, develop a policy for grant reviews and approvals by the Board of Selectmen prior to their application, a senior tax relief policy, a town hall use policy, a policy relative to clear cutting for development purposes, clear cutting our land. And then there's a number of items that come up that are relative to the Grafton Upton Railroad, thinking about route restrictions for their 18-wheelers, the ongoing landfill closure, the sewer main project, which we have an easement on their property. Then moving forward, developing a strategic planning session with all of the boards and committees. This was requested by a few chair people about 6 months ago. Looking at Governor's Landing, the proposed development project on 140. And then a number of issues that arise from our downtown redevelopment efforts. So what do we want to do with 6 Main Street? What do we want to do as far as the RFP and the potentially reissuing that for development purposes? With the Warren Street redevelopment next to Town Hall and moving that effort forward. Infrastructure improvement, both sidewalks, potential rotary, Grove Street, cut through, the Brooks intersection. So a lot of infrastructure ideas have come up in the past 2 years about the downtown redevelopment area. The RFP committee had submitted a request to change their mission. So to revisit that item. Looking at, so again, as we all know, there's over $700,000 in some of our trust funds, so potential developing a program for people that are in need, one that's more public and has been socialized and is used on a regular basis. Looking at our updating our master plan, which was last updated in 2005. The ongoing conversation regarding the community center. The building committee is having a meeting as we speak right now to continue that effort as we speak. Holy Angels, that's obviously part of the redevelopment of the town center as well. And what's the final outcome of that building? FY22 budget planning is something that, is going to have a lot of conversations coming year. Looking at the schools and the percentage increase that they may require. Looking at trash and recycling, which has been a major budget driver this past year, and then kind of looking at all the different budget line items and seeing where we could do better. So the national conversation about race relations. So what does that mean to our teachers, law enforcement, working with the police department around some of their policies and procedures.
Sorry, can folks mute their phones if they're not talking, please? We're hearing some background noise.
So the DPW building infrastructure upgrades, potential streets and sidewalks, and some grant opportunities there. The 7 p.m. meetings, and I think more or less having a consistent time and meeting date so that the public can forecast that and pencil that into their calendars. The Finance Department reorganization, which was the public comment period, was just released today. The town planner and what we plan to do with the part-time time planner position. Again, there's a lot of discussion on that during the town meeting. Fire Minister EMS Advisory Committee. The trust fund balances, looking at those, working with the Treasurer Collector's Office on getting a better sense of what those are on a rolling basis. Potential succession planning for committee seats. Something I've talked a lot about is staffing, forecasting, and retention, and our online calendar and how we can help the community with that. Our capital improvement planning process, 10-year capital improvement plan, working with the capital budget committee, and then potentially a charter commission. Again, there's a lot of conversations at town meeting about some of the reorganizing that's been taking place, and maybe it's time for a charter commission. Pending any questions, I'll turn it back to the chair. Brett, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. The one thing I want to add to the conversation, thank you for going through that, regarding 2022 planning, is a tax relief or a tax, I don't know what you want to call it, a tax reduction or tax relief for the community in general, not just for seniors or what have you. Again, we can discuss what that may or may not look like, but I think it's important for us to at least have the conversation, because I know in the past we have really not had an explicit proactive conversation, and so we end up sort of falling into what the department budgets are, the standard growth, etc. So I would like to at least entertain that discussion. So let's add that as a line item under the 22 planning in addition to schools and trash, please. And then Steve and Maureen, what else do we need to add to this list, go through and prioritize a bit?
I mean, Brett, I would just kind of piggyback on what you just said regarding budgeting and taxes and things of that nature. And we always use the term level funded budget. In the past 3 budget cycles, I hear a level funded budget approach. And then when we go to print, we're 4% over. And I look at different departments and they're up 6%, 8%. Again, taking the school out of it, that obviously has nothing, that's not under our control. But within our departments that we are supposed to be governing, frankly, I think that we're just flying away on some of these budgets. We're up big numbers. And I think, I know I've mentioned it in the past, maybe a look back, a 5 or 6 year look back, to see what those budgets looked like 5 or 6 years ago and what they look like today. So I think that may be a helpful exercise to see where were we and where are we now.
Love it.
Last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you, Maureen. I think it's also helpful, especially there's some questions in here about growth and look ahead topics and things of that nature, but also looking in our surrounding towns. How do we feel that we're doing based on what our surrounding towns have accomplished? I think that would be something that it's going to be difficult to quantify, but I think that's something that may be useful to look at something like that.
Talk a little bit more about that, Steve. What kinds of things would you be looking for or looking at in these other towns that we would learn from or apply here?
Well, One of my chief objectives has been to try to promote and try somehow, yeah, I guess promote's the best word, commercial investment. With the exception of maybe some remodelings on some older buildings, I don't see any commercial investment in our town. Yet in my particular job, I travel around, within a 5, 6, 7 town area, and I see different things, that have been constructed. Even small towns like Hopedale, may add another road onto an existing cul-de-sac or industrial park or something along those lines, and you'll see new buildings being built. Take even a few years ago, they built an ice skating arena, probably 5 years ago or so, maybe 6 years ago in Hopedale. So how is it that these towns are getting that commercial growth and we're very, very stagnant? As we all know, we cringe come tax rate setting time when we talk about the percentage of commercial versus personal property versus residential as it makes up our 100% tax base. So I think those are some things that we could look at. And again, I don't know what we're doing wrong and what they're doing right, but it just seems like those type of projects are escaping Upton. They're passing us by.
So let's add that to the list, Eric, commercial development as an item to potentially prioritize and discuss.
And I just had a comment to what Steve said about the level funded budgets. We do not have a level funded. We've always gone with level service, which is different. And I mean, we could go level funded, but it depends on, you have to take a look at everything that we need versus the school going up and the trash going up. And it's kind of hard to stay within the level funded.
Yep. So it sounds like that sounds like, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Maureen. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so let's, I mean, I'm frankly a fan of having that conversation. Again, we don't have to, make any decisions per se, but I would like to prioritize that conversation so we can get as far ahead of it as possible so that we have the most amount of time possible to socialize alternatives and talk about how we can get information from the community in terms of what their priorities are, right? Because there's Steve, what you're talking about, which is level funding, right? So the most aggressive form of tax relief would be cutting taxes, right? So reducing, eliminating, or shrinking services, right? So you'd go out and you'd say, okay, we're going to reduce everything by 10%. So that's the most severe austerity measures. You can do what you said, Steve, which is level funding. So all budgets just stay even. Maureen, what you're talking about, right, is level services, which basically means we're taxing to the levy at the 2.5%. And then we want to improve or increase or invest in services and infrastructure. And that's where we say, hey, you know what? Every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we expect that we're going to have to do a 2.5 override. We know that we're, a growing community, that we want to invest more in infrastructure, in services, so we can make that decision too. But I'd love to have that dialogue sooner rather than later and as publicly as possible. So I would be a fan of prioritizing that, at least over the next 3 to 6 weeks in terms of an initial discussion in one of our meetings to go a little bit deeper.
I think that's a good idea because we should be right at the beginning of the budget process and know what's coming up front.
That's right. Right. We can't in January say, hey, wait, these department budgets are too high. It doesn't. We need to do that now. So, yep. Okay. So let's slot that in, Derek, as sort of one of the top priorities over the next coming weeks.
So as you speak, when you identify priorities, I'm just going to color them in red. So perfect. Just so folks know.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. So the other one that's a priority for me, just giving the place we're operating in right now, is some of the conversations around, I know you have it listed as race relations here. I don't know what the right thing to call it is, but I think of it like, the integration or partnership with the Black Lives Matter dialogue and discussion. And so, you know, I'm having some conversations with some of the folks that are part of an organization called Mendon Upton Social Justice, maybe, about having some kind of a forum format where we get people together and have a conversation. So for me, that's a personal priority. I don't know what, if any, role we would need to play as a broader board, but I would like to have that conversation as a priority over the next few weeks.
Okay. And as part of the budget process, could we discuss that financial reserve policy also as a priority?
Yes, for sure. Is that in here already somewhere, Derek? I feel like
Yes,
it was.
that's number one.
Yep.
Yes.
So let's do that sooner rather than later. Yep, I agree that should be a priority. And again, I think we'll sort of let's try to, maybe we'll pick 10 and sort of prioritize those, but I think that's critical.
So is that what you're thinking? Pick 6 or 8 of these or 10 of these, and then you want to try to lay out when you want to address them in order? Is that what you're thinking?
I think so, yeah. Well, yes, that's what I'm thinking. You know, it's open to discussion, but I'm thinking that will help us feel good about the fact that we're not just punting everything week to week, but that we have a plan to get to certain things. So yeah, that's the idea.
I mean, we've always had over the past probably, well, I guess even a little before COVID really hit us hard back in March, even prior to that, I believe we had 4 or 5 look-ahead topics, and then the list grew because we were kind of unable to address them just because of meetings, schedule, budget, again, the pandemic, things of that nature. So, you know, it may be a good idea to address our look-ahead topics, which I believe financial reserve policy was on there as well anyways. So
I think, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, all the things from the look ahead were added to this list.
I will cross-check, but I'm almost 100% certain that we put all those look-ahead items on this list here. But I'll double-check just in a second.
Yeah.
But saying that we're in the beginning of the budget process, I think we would like to keep all the financial things together as priorities to help give departments ideas of where we're at and where they're going to go.
Yeah.
Like that senior tax relief policy, that will affect the budget.
Yeah.
The financial reserve policy will affect the budget. Capital is going to affect the budget, and the capital budget committee should be involved from the very beginning of the budget process also.
That's a great call out. Can we set a time, Derek, to connect with the capital budget committee and get a report out from them on where they are, what they're doing, and what the upcoming investments are for fall and for spring?
Yeah, I'll make a note here and then reach out to the chairperson.
I know you've been working on that, Derek. So I just think it should be part of the budget process from the beginning.
Yeah.
And Maureen, as far as the senior tax relief, I think based on last week's dialogue that we had on this, I'm not sure that that's going to have a big impact on the budget. It sounds like the only thing that they're going to try to see is move some of those thresholds and move that percentage rate. But based on what they're going to be administering that money out of overlay, I don't think that's going to have much effect at all on the actual budget. The other thing I think would be helpful is just to refresh everybody's memory. Derek, you may have the numbers in front of you, but where were we with regard to stabilization and capital stabilization, those two funds? Where were we with those balances prior to the annual town meeting? And then, of course, we expended, I think it was $261,000 or $259,000. I can't exactly remember.
Yeah, so again, you know, I'm not exact down to the penny, but we're about $2.2 million in general stabilization and just north of $200,000 in capital stabilization.
Okay. So we were about 2.4 then leading up to the annual town meeting.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
So let's prioritize that capital. So let's make that red, Derek. Or you? Oh, okay. you already put it in here. Got it. The date. Okay. The other thing I think that's a priority only because of where we are in the process is hearing from or determining what the next steps will be around the RFP for the downtown revitalization. Just given the market and what's going on, my guess is that that's going to be, sort of on ice for a while in terms of interest from developers. But we should at least have that conversation and disposition that RFP to figure out what the next step is so that we can keep moving that forward. I think there's a very clear expectation that we continue to take action and make progress in that regard, whatever it is that action and progress looks like.
And I guess based on that, has that committee met, or has the EDC met at all in the last month, or everybody pretty much just stagnant at this point in time?
Yeah, I consider the EDC hasn't met in quite some time. I would say last time they met was prior to COVID. And as you know, RFP committee, they had tried to advance just a mission change and have their focus be solely on the downtown redevelopment. And the last, as you all recall, last time they had this discussion, the board of selectmen thought it'd be best to circle back to the EDC, get their response, get their take on that request before any decisions were made. So that's kind of where we left it off with both of those two committees.
Yeah, so I think there's two things, right? There's the reorg or remissioning of the EDC and the RFP committee. Separately from that, I think there's a conversation about what to do with the actual RFP. I think those are two different or distinct conversations. I don't know what you all think. I feel like those are two different conversations, and the RFP conversation is a higher priority for me than the reorganization, which can also be a priority, but is less important.
I think maybe when we have that particular meeting, it may be helpful to invite both of those different committees, the EDC and the RFP committee. And, let's, it does, to me, frankly, there just isn't enough work to go around there for two committees.
Yep.
So I just can't see having committees that are half staffed and barely meet. It just, to me, that doesn't make sense.
Totally agree.
So I think we need to really sit down and get a game plan there. If we're satisfied with the way the RFP is written and crafted, then I guess, that's a discussion we'll have to have with both committees and see what makes the most sense moving forward.
Yeah, totally agree.
Could we also prioritize the finance department organization?
Yes.
And the all boards meeting for strategic planning?
Yes. I am in favor of both of those being prioritized.
So just as a way of an update, I had quickly mentioned that the proposed reorganization plan went up for public comment today. I did take the liberty to schedule an August 18th hearing. That would give us a better part of 5 weeks to receive any testimonies from the public, and then share those testimonies at a future Board of Selectmen meeting, and then hopefully make some final decision on whether or not that reorganization plan will move forward. So that's currently scheduled for August 18th. And then, Maureen, what was your other one that you had mentioned? The reorg plan and.
The other one was the all boards meeting.
All right.
Strategic meeting.
Okay. So do you want me to make that one red? This one here, all boards meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, because that might take a little advanced planning, right? So we may not get to that till the fall, but we should get it on the calendar.
Yep.
Okay.
What else we got?
Yeah. What else for a high? I mean, that's a good number to get us through the next 6 to 8 weeks. Are there other things? There's certainly a few in here that I think I would personally put sort of in the next tier. But I think those would be at least for me, the highest priorities. Just scroll through this Derek, and just make sure we're.
So as we go through the ones that are highlighted in red, in the third column, I can kind of put a schedule by, and whether that's going to be on a Board of Selectmen agenda, we can punch that in there, or maybe it has to be outside of a Board of Selectmen meeting. But
Yep.
if the board wants to talk about the deadline, then I can punch that in there, so we are very clear as to the expectations on these moving forward.
Yeah. Why don't we, the financial reserve policy has been out there for a while, so why don't we put that up for the next meeting if you guys are open to that?
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that. And I would also say town hall use policy's been hanging around for at least 8 or 9 months. So I would think we should probably advance that one forward as well.
So that's when it's definitely been out there for a while. I'm just not sure how critical it is in terms of a priority. Right, nobody's doing anything. But go ahead.
I think the finances are more important at this time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The same thing with like the distribution of the Ristine funds. Like that's something that's important to me. I want to get it done, but I think we have to front load some of the more critical financial conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the solar clear cutting. Like that's important, but it's not as we've got to get to the financial stuff first.
I mean, the budget building process,
Mm-hmm.
we start right last week of December, first part of January, but the department heads start, a solid month ahead of that. So we have plenty of time as far as financials. Really, it's direction from the board that I think we need to establish.
Exactly. Yep.
I think the budget season starts July 1st. That's when you start pulling it together.
Yeah, I would say
you want these departments to know how much they're going to have, whether they're going to be level funded, level service cut.
I mean, historically, we don't do it that early, Maureen, but, whatever. Early is fine.
Yeah.
It's just there's so many twists and turns in the road,
But
it's a good way to keep track of
our
them.
last meeting, we had 6 months of budget building, and we go to annual town meeting, and, we have a position that somehow got missed. So it doesn't seem to matter how long ahead in advance you plan it. You've still got to be able to move on the fly.
Planning is always good.
Yeah, I agree. It's critical that we forecast as much as possible. Because for me, it's not just our direction. We need to be able to respond to the voters and the people that support us. So I don't think we can come out in December and say, okay, we want taxes, we want everybody's budget to be cut by 10%. We want all the services to be cut by 10%. I think that's too late. And I think if we want to say, hey, you know what, are people comfortable with the way the budget's been going up and the way the services have been going up? Do people like that? Again, I don't want to have that conversation in December. I think we need to start having those, pick a position that we agree on and then have the conversations or socialize the conversations or find ways to get more information well ahead of December.
I agree with you, Brett.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here on the budget process. So, we build the budget based upon what we know are natural growth and fixed costs. And our focus is, for the most part, I mean, we had a new position we added this year in the part-time town planner, but everything else is really level service, as Maureen pointed out. So the departments will do whatever is asked of them. And so if the Board of Selectmen says, well, we can't afford level service, so we want a level funded budget. Well, I think we need to have that conversation early part of the year, because the Board of Selectmen needs to know what that means. Like how many people, what services are we going to lose? What positions are we going to lose prior to going ahead and saying, yeah, we just want level funded? Because level funded will mean reduced services. And that could be something with just, laying off, not just, but laying off staff. So, maybe not having a second patrol officer on the overnight shift, that reduces services. People don't see it day in and day out, but it's certainly going to be a reduction service. And we need to know what liabilities and risks we're taking before we go ahead and put pen to paper. But the departments are happy to build any budget But I agree that I think we need to have a conversation well in advance so people know what they're
Yep.
getting themselves into.
That's the critical piece, right? It's not just about, yeah, everybody wants lower taxes, but when you start to translate that into fewer police officers, less infrastructure, not as many roads getting paved, fewer teachers, right? That makes it real. So, if that's something that we're after, it's well said, Derek. We need to forecast that so that there can be a public dialogue about it.
We could also track the revenues as they come in during the year, but we need a starting point, and that's why I think the department should be right involved in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good on the financial reserve policy. All board meeting, Derek, I think you put, did you put a date in there for that? Let's try to get that scheduled, I think, for the fall. So maybe, I don't know. Well, what do you guys think? I'm thinking, we don't want to try to schedule that over the summer given people's vacations, but maybe a September timeframe.
September would be good.
September, October, I think would be fine.
Yeah, agreed.
Depending what, if we have hearings that may come up, we never know how busy the agendas may become.
Yeah. So let's
do we
put
want
that
to
in.
aim for mid-September?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say that maybe the second meeting of September.
Okay, so this all boards meeting, is this going to be at a regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting? Or is this going to be
No, yeah.
additional?
Yeah, I think
You
it'll be
wanna-
maybe.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
You want to do it a workshop type meeting, or?
Yep, I think that's right.
Okay.
So maybe
Yeah,
on a week,
so
a week. Yeah, a week. Like I'm picturing it more like on a Saturday morning or something like that. I don't know what you guys were thinking.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I was actually thinking, an evening. Maybe if we normally meet on a Tuesday, do it on an evening. But I think when you do an all board meeting like that, it's difficult when you get too many people on the screen at once. So hopefully by September, that can be a live in-person meeting. I don't know if with social distancing, I'm not thinking we could do that at the little town hall upstairs, but perhaps we can do it downstairs and the main town hall floor.
Yep, agreed.
I think with people dialing in with phones, it's very hard to tell who's in and who's out.
Yep. So let's plan it for. I think it's just too much content to try to cover in an evening meeting, Steve.
All right.
Okay.
I'll buy the donuts.
That's what you said last time, Maureen. I'm still
No,
waiting.
I did not.
Maureen, I was gonna be funny and say that I'll bring the beer. Since
I was going to say I'll bring the mimosas.
Oh boy. All right. Governor's Landing. No. Reissue RP. I think that needs to be. Talk to the. We should have those folks in either the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next meeting, Sandy can help me with this one. We're starting to get a lot of agenda items, I think, for July 14th. That's going to be a big meeting with year-end transfers.
Is that? Yeah. Sorry, I meant not the one in a week. I'm sort of thinking the next one. Sorry.
Okay, so the next one is July 14th. We don't have another one scheduled until August 4th. You only put this on August 4th agenda?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
What do you guys think? That's fine with me.
Yeah, because the next one, the 14th, is next week.
Right.
And you want to talk about financial reserve, and there was another one I think that was going to get on there, plus whatever we have for regular business.
Exactly. Yeah, and we can look. I'll look at it. We can look at it, between over the next couple of days once we sort of see where this shakes out. And I don't want to do 5-hour meetings. We don't need to get too crazy. Yeah. So
Sure.
the budget planning, sort of the directional pieces. When do you guys think, that's either the the first or second meeting of August we're probably looking at now based on everything else we just laid out? Or do we think this would come up sooner and maybe push something else out?
I'm thinking second meeting in August, most likely.
That would be fine.
Okay. Sound good, Derek?
Yeah, so that would be August 18th. And just keep in mind, and I don't think it'd be too much at this point, but that is the scheduled public hearing for the proposed reorg.
Yep.
Scheduled
And
hearing for what? I didn't hear you.
the proposed finance department reorganization. That evening will be the public hearing on that, where we will take a look at all of the public testimonies that have been submitted in writing over the course of the last 5 weeks.
So Derek, from your perspective, this conversation about directional guidance to the departments from the board in terms of budget planning, and again, we obviously know we need to get the feedback and see what the impacts are. You know, what's the timing from your perspective on something like that would work? Because if we don't need to push this, you know, maybe there's a different timing we can do.
So I would say that what would be important is to have informational sessions on the budget. And what I mean by that is, start to take a look at what our projected increased revenues are going to be. Again, we can't project everything, but we can project what our 2.5% increase is going to be. And people need to know what that number is. Is that $400,000 and then a conservative $200,000 in new growth? Okay, that's $600,000 in revenue. So when we that would be our new revenue. So what does that mean versus a level service budget? And so I think what we could do is maybe over the course of, say, starting in August, is maybe what we can do is just present to the Board of Selectmen just informational pieces to start to build upon that conversation, so folks really know when we start to develop the budget what our left limits are and what our right limits are as far as our constraints with revenues. Folks need to understand that the last 5 years we've had an average of an 11% increase on our pension liabilities, and so that's a fixed number that we can't control. And so when you start to look at fixed costs, then people start to realize, okay, how much money do we have left over in order to manage the budget? So I think what we could do is start to introduce those types of conversations, maybe starting in August and building on that through the month of September and October. And by then, we'll have a sense of what the state aid is going to be, at least in this year, and we'll be heading into our budget building session by December 1st, if that makes sense.
Okay.
You can also start with the estimated receipts too, couldn't you, Derek? I mean, work with the treasurer collector and the assessor and the building inspector.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by looking at our revenues. So you're looking at our local receipts, our estimated receipts, looking at what 2.5% would bring in for new revenue, and so it's a finite number of money. It's not like we're bringing in an extra $3 million every year in new revenue. So to me, it's about, let's start the conversation with providing really good information data so everyone has understanding of our limits. In addition to that, I think what we also have to start talking about is, where are there opportunities in the budget or not? We've been talking about trash for the last 2 years, but we don't have the trash conversation until mid to late February, maybe March. By then it's too late. So, maybe we start having a trash conversation early on, and if folks decide, hey, the trash is important, well, that's a priority. So we know we have to find the resources in order to fund that project or not.
Yep. Okay.
I think based on that, it may be a good idea to have the Board of Health come in at a regularly scheduled meeting, maybe at the first quarter mark of the year, and let's try to get an idea of what trash is going to look like. Has anything changed? Has the state come up with any solutions for the problems that we keep hearing about every January, February?
Yeah. And that's a great point, Steve, because I mean, I know you remember and we all recall that, we sort of kicked the can down the road, the proverbial can down the road, hoping that the state would provide more direction or clarity around how this was going to be handled at a state level and maybe even at a federal level. But to your point, we can't just keep doing that. So let's get that directional check in as early as we can and then figure out what we need to do. So great.
Brett, could we do that under the all boards meeting for strategic planning?
Yeah, that's a good thought, because we would have because I feel like having Concom there and I don't know. What do you guys think? I think that could work depending on how big that agenda gets.
What were we planning on that particular date? Did we have any? Because I was just thinking BOH, we might want to have them in a little bit into the year just to see if there's any news from the state. How, I don't know when the state will have any updates for them, but with regard to recycling or different solutions for recycling.
Wasn't that all boards meeting going to be a workshop?
Yeah.
So
that why don't we put that on there as a placeholder? What do you think, Derek?
Let's see. Well, I mean, I think that it would probably be good to raise that issue in the meeting, but I wouldn't make that a big agenda other than more than a briefing. I think that the Board of Health really should. I really think the Board of Health, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee need to have a tri-board meeting and to start this conversation maybe in early September. Because really, ultimately, the Finance Committee, they're the ones, the Board of Health, they're an elected body. They submit their budget to the Finance Committee, and it's the Finance Committee that's going to either approve or disapprove their budget. So I think for information purposes, it's good for the Board of Selectmen to be involved, but in this case, the Finance Committee should be involved. And so my opinion is we should have a tri-board meeting separate from the all boards meeting to go over kind of like, to me, that's kind of more like direction, everyone being on the same page as far as the vision of the community as a whole. This trash issue is a black hole. Is not getting better, and the state is not going to help us at all with this issue.
When do you think the right time for that meeting would be?
I would say no. I would say no later than early to mid-September. Hopefully we'll have our state aid numbers by then. And so we'll at least have a sense of what that's going to be and, what the reduction is going to be. Because we're going to start, if we have a reduction in state aid, we're going to have to address that as well in September. But, I would say like a tri-board meeting in mid-September because, again, the Board of Health, they need to help us with this solution, and give us some options on this as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Could we add that as a priority, put that on this list?
Yes. Yeah, let's put that in here for mid or late September. That's a good call on having a tri-board meeting, Derek.
Yes, very good.
So I'll work with FinCom and we'll find a time where all three can get together and we'll find a place sometime in September.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good call out. While you're typing that up, so the next one, the Black Lives Matter stuff, I will run point on that for now, and then bring anything that we come up with back to the board for consideration. There's nothing really for us to do at this point because whether it's teachers or Black history or law enforcement or policies with the police department, I think we want to have a conversation with the types of things other communities are doing, talk with the various chiefs and departments on sort of what may or may not make sense, talk with community organizations in terms of priorities and strategies that they think would make sense for the town of Upton. So, I'll just have some exploratory discussions. We don't need to put it on an agenda, but I'll take point on that for the time being, unless somebody else has any concern with that. Okay.
So the DPW one, the building infrastructure upgrade, streets and sidewalks, Shouldn't that come under the capital budget committee and the FinCom before we discuss it?
So this is a good one because, you know, we're talking millions and millions of dollars here. And I think this is an issue because obviously the DPW building and that whole footprint over there is aging and doesn't meet environmental standards. So, you know, that's a priority at some point that we have to address. And then, you know, there's been numerous community members who have asked for streets and sidewalks to be upgraded. And so, you know, as you know, we have very limited dollars. And so for me, part of this is, you know, how are we going to prioritize those dollars? We have a road management plan, but
Yep.
Maple Ave, you know, I think the price tag came in at $750,000 just to put sidewalks on a certain stretch of Maple Ave. So it's a lot of work on behalf of the DPW to continue to take these types of requests. And so I think at some point we should have a conversation on like how we're going to manage that request. And, you know, Dennis did a great job just talking about street sign requests. And when it costs the DPW at least $3,000 every time someone wants to install a traffic sign. So, you know, just kind of managing expectations with the community that we can't be responsive to every request because we have a very finite number of resources that we have to be able to improve our infrastructure.
I think there's a couple of different conversations here, right? Because I think, Maureen, what you're asking about is sort of the strategic investment around the DPW building and upgrade, sort of the multi-million-dollar, multi-phase, multi-year project that the DPW review committee or whatever we call that group was putting together. Is that what you're referring to, or are you talking about street sign requests?
No, I'm not talking about street sign requests, but I mean, that should be on the capital budget forecast.
Yeah.
The plan, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think this should be on the list right now because I don't know where they've prioritized that plan, you know, on the plan.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good idea, Derek. Can you, because I know that Dan Lazars is on both the capital budget committee, but also on the DPW review committee. So maybe if you could just have a conversation with him and say, hey, you know, how do these things intersect when you come and talk to the board? Can we talk about the DPW from a capital investment perspective and just get their perspective? That makes sense.
That we need to think about is how quickly all of those capital items come forward. You know, say for instance, a few years ago, and I don't know what the DPW has this year for equipment, but we know they just had two items come up. I believe one was a fork truck, one was I think it was a mower, and then they had another mower last fall. So it's kind of, you know, it's hard to put all those pieces together, you know, I suppose, unless we know far enough in advance.
Yeah, and I think they do. I just think that's what we need to get visibility into and take the time to look at it. And again, putting that in the context, like it's one thing to have a $30,000, $50,000, $75,000, $150,000 piece of capital equipment, but we also do need to plan for those bigger investments in terms of upgrading the DPW facility and capabilities inside, in terms of whether it's, you know, gas operations or cleaning up truck equipment, cleaning operations, wash basins, etc., which are, you know, much more significant investments.
A turf truck was the one I couldn't remember. That's the other item that came up this past spring.
Yeah. Yep.
Eric, has Dennis got that tie and bond report back?
He does have it back, and I'm making notes over here.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to think about how we can provide information back to the board and the community. I think Dan can provide a briefing on the DPW building itself. Dennis does have a tie and bond report and can at some point provide a briefing on that. And then, at the same time, he can provide an update on the road management plan and the Complete Streets infrastructure grant that he's been pursuing. I think those items would then lend itself to a bigger conversation about prioritizing our public works infrastructure.
Okay. Can you scroll down and see what, or when you're done? Okay. So I think, those are our high priority items that we marked in red. We've got the next several meetings planned out, which is what we wanted to accomplish. Derek, if you can, let's figure out how to get this list onto the website and get these agendas at least tentatively. I don't know if we post them or how that needs to be handled from a open meeting law perspective. But again, I want to forecast these conversations as much as possible for the public. And also so that we can have people that come in and say, hey, I noticed this on the list of priorities and it wasn't prioritized, but we think that's really important. Or here's something that's not on the list that I'd love to have put on the list. I think the more we can engage with the public and having that dialogue, the better. So let's talk about how to get the word out on this stuff. And then the second thing, and this is more Maureen for you and for Steve and I, and soliciting input from our constituents just around sort of what the next tranche of priorities might be for, we'll call it calendar Q4 of this year. We've kind of got through September, so then we can start to think about the next group of activities for October, November, December.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
What was your thinking on the 7 p.m. meetings, Brett?
I mean, my thinking is that I'm not even sure why that's on here other than reinforcing that we should keep our meetings at 7 o'clock, unless you guys want to have a conversation about it.
No, I didn't know why it was on there.
Yeah, I don't know either. Steve, Derek, do you know why that was on here?
Again, this was put together quite some time ago. I think this may have been in the middle of, we had adjusted some of our meetings. We were meeting very often in the months of May and mostly May and late April. And so I think, our regularly scheduled Tuesday, first and third Tuesday meetings were at 7, but then we had a lot of other meetings in between. Some were starting at 5, some were starting at 6:30. So I think this was more or less to say, are we still going to reaffirm that we're going to always start at 7? This way there's some predictability by the community. Yeah.
Okay. So back to where we were on that one for sure.
I mean, I guess that's the question is, based on, as you look forward with remote meetings, I don't think it's quite as pressing. With live meetings, we have a lot of meetings that are running till 9:30, 10 o'clock, which is not that big of a shock for us selectmen, but town hall staff is there all day. So I guess that would be the question. In the event that you foresee a long meeting, would you consider starting the meeting at 6:30 or 6 o'clock?
I personally wouldn't.
No.
Yeah, I mean, just because you run into kids having dinner, kids having sports, people trying to wait for babysitters, waiting for people to get home from work, or I think that the consistency is important for folks. At least that's what we had heard, or at least that's what I had certainly heard a lot when I was running from a lot of people, that the inconsistent times were a challenge for people because it created the impression that we were, having these meetings and not encouraging the public to participate by changing the time so that it would be hard for people to participate, which I don't think was ever the case. But again, very clearly after the past several town meetings we've been to, every meeting we go to, there's some issue around transparency or skepticism of meetings or what we're trying to do or visibility. There's clearly not a lot of trust between a lot of the community members, or at least town meeting participants in the board. So I think this is just one small way that we can continue to reinforce with people that the perception that a lot of people have isn't the reality, and we've got to keep working hard to prove that out.
Agreed.
You know, in along that vein, I found it kind of interesting. You know, there was obviously a lot of complaints about our particular annual town meeting, and Mendon held theirs, I believe, a week or a week and a half after our meeting, and they had 285 people for the meeting. Somehow we're missing something. I don't know how they had such stellar participation and we had such poor participation. I'm not sure.
What we were missing, Steve, was a 2.5 override.
Correct.
That's the only reason they got that kind of participation, Steve.
We would have if we had a 2.5 override, but we didn't have to.
The warrant article was ultimately the same. You were spending the same amount of money. It was the same question, just with one word different. I mean, there was very little.
Do you think that I mean, that's okay. I hear what you're saying.
I don't know. Right. We can only guess.
And they had 285 people indoors.
So what else do you think we need to line up here, and then I will open it back up for any public comment that people may have or input that other folks may have, and then we can wrap up.
I think we're pretty good for the first quarter.
Good.
And we'll see what we can get done.
Yeah, this was great. Steve, go ahead. Or Derek, too.
I just had 2 comments. So one, I see this process, which is very helpful, especially, you know, at the department level, to have direction. At least since I've been here, the departments, we have great department heads, and they've done a good job of really trying to identify what the priorities are going to be. So this is helpful that they can now get a sense from the Board of Selectmen what the priorities should be. But this process is more evolutionary, is what I see. We go through a planning process in the month of July where we set department goals with the department head. So I'm given the fact that it sounds like there's a consensus, at least on this agenda, knowing that it's going to expand over time. What I'm going to do is try to forecast a lot of these items with the department heads and make it part of their annual work plan as well. So this way, they have more time to work on some of these issues, like the issue of the developing a pristine welfare, what I call like a safety net program, is going to take longer than 3 months to develop. I mean, that's going to take research and best practices and really pull the community together, maybe do an analysis of the community. So I'm going to work with Janice Nowicki on that so we can start that process early on, so we're not waiting until, say, December, right? So that's the first thing I wanted to bring up. So I'm just letting you know that I'm going to start working with them on these items. And then the other, I just added this at the bottom under line 58 here, communication. So, and since prior to town meeting, and then I would say the week after town meeting, you know, we continue to get this regular complaint that we don't do enough with communicating with the public, that we don't provide enough notice. And you know, we do as much as we possibly can with trying to have a social media presence, trying to use electronic signboards, you know, using websites, you know, using the town crier. So I would love for folks to tell us how we can do better, you know, because I don't know what else we can do, but we're always open to ideas. So if the board is okay with it, I'd love to keep communication here as kind of an ongoing item for improvement. But my hope is that we get some really constructive feedback from the community that can help us tell them what they feel are the best platforms to get regular information from Town Hall and from the Board of Selectmen as a whole.
Communication is very important amongst the department heads, the staff, us, everyone, town, the citizens. It's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Yes.
So again, you know, from our perspective, we don't know what else we can do to push information out. So it would be great if folks in the community had ideas. Let us know. We'll be happy to operationalize those ideas, whatever they may be.
One thing just quickly that I'm glad you brought it up, Derek, and we can figure out if we talk about this later or do some figure out how much it's going to cost and discuss it or whatever. But I would really encourage us to find a way to distribute the warrants to the voters in advance, whether it's via direct mail or including it in the town crier. It's come up a couple of times since I have been on the board, and I think it's at the point now where we just need to do it. Again, more as a preventative measure and just trying to go that extra step to reinforce that we're, being open.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
I think
Maureen or Steve, any initial thoughts on that?
I think starting the budgeting process early and getting involved and getting the departments involved and looking to see where we are and doing updates, say every month or 2 months, I think that would help. I think we'd have our warrant done a lot earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is you have the warrant, but the other part of it is you have the budget presentation. So I think that's the part of it, is getting that budget presentation out a little bit sooner, as far as, what those positions look like, what those dollars look like, all the increases, the percentage increases. I mean, I think that's got to get out to the people sooner rather than later. And I think, unfortunately, that doesn't go, it goes to print however many weeks before the actual annual town meeting, but for some reason, it doesn't seem to get into the folks' hands.
So I would say that, and I hope, I wish someone like Paul was on who has a historical perspective, but from what they have told me, that since I've gone there, like, this is the fastest, the most detailed information that the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen has seen, getting the budget presented to them in early January. And the January 1st budget pass is very detailed. It has position by position what the budget increase is going to be, line item by line item, what the percentage increase is going to be. So, Steve, I don't think it's the fact that the information is not readily available. I think the question is, how do we engage folks so that they can start reviewing the budget in January? I mean, unless you're suggesting we have the budget complete by earlier than January, which would be really challenging, but I mean, we could do it. I'm not sure January, February, March, 3 months to review the budget is certainly a lot of time. It's just getting it into folks' hands.
Yeah. So what if we, because I think there's two things here, right? You're both right. We have given more lead time for the budget visibility than has ever existed in the town, and that's tremendous effort by all the department heads under your leadership, Derek. So that's fantastic. And Steve, to your point, people still show up to town meeting and seem to indicate that they're surprised to see what's there. So maybe what we need to do is figure out a way, if we distribute the warrant, is maybe we distribute a summary budget or something with the warrant. There's a page or two in the back of it that says, hey, here are the key highlights. We know everybody's going to look at any line item that's increased more than 5% or 10%, or pick the number. And here's 2 pages with the 37 things that fit into that category, with a brief explanation of a sentence or two on why or what it is, or something along those lines, so that we're, proactively getting details out to people, both the warrant, but also, to your point, Steve, key budget items as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, we know that we're all invested in this budget building process, again, right around the 1st of January. I don't think that the people are wanting to look at it that early. But I think that once you get to April and we're ready to go to print, I think the warrant articles, people can view the warrant articles, but I don't think people can view the actual budget line items till a much later date. And again, I'm not so sure that that's going to have a huge effect on attendance at the same time. I'm not sure that's really the answer.
Yeah, hold on a second, Steve, because I'm not sure that's totally true. Derek, I
No.
thought the budget was published on the website.
Yeah. So when I released the budget, my first recommendation, it has more detail in the town manager's recommendation than what is submitted to town meeting. So that's what I was talking about earlier. It's a breakdown line by line of every position, every dollar that's spent by percentage. That is released in usually mid to late January, and including each department has a cover page, and it doesn't, and if you read the cover page doesn't talk about, the annual reoccurring expenses. It brings to the surface the new expenses that people would be more interested in. People don't care that, we have a $30,000 training line item last year and a $30,000 training line item this year. They care that we added a new town planner position. And so all of that is in there. So
Derek, sorry. The question isn't about right. We're having two different conversations. The budget's thorough. It's done in advance. When is that document that you talked about published on the website? I thought it was put up there pretty much right away.
Yeah, it was mid to late January. It's on the website.
So Steve, the detailed line item by line item budget is on the website in mid to late January. Is that early enough for you?
Yeah, you can't go any earlier.
Okay, great. So but just make sure you spread the word, right? Because even you weren't aware that that was the case. So if you don't know it, then nobody else is going to know it. So definitely spread the word amongst your peers, friends, constituents, voters, whoever you can, that detailed information is available in January.
Yeah, I'm not, but again, that's the rough first pass budget. I think that my comment has been misinterpreted by both of you. I'm talking about the actual finished document, the final budget presentation. That's the part that I was talking about. And when does that actually go up on the website? The finished, after we've weeded out the articles that make it, the articles that get withdrawn, the actual finished product. Again, not the rough budget building process, the finished document. When does that actually get up?
Yeah,
and
that's a good question.
Again, let me preface this by saying I'm not sure that it's going to make a big difference one way or another.
Right.
I'm just saying, is that something that we can look to try to get that particular finish from the point in time that we execute the warrant, actually execute it to the time that that's actually viewable online. That's the specific period of time I'm talking. Again, not December,
So
January.
Let Derek answer that, please.
Sure, great.
No, you're absolutely right, Steve. So that's a great question. So that finished product, the final Finance Committee's recommendation with the Board of Selectmen's warrant under non-COVID years is typically executed the very first Tuesday of April. Once that's executed by the Board of Selectmen, that first Tuesday of April, that document is PDF'd and usually goes online the very next day. And then, as you know, then is posted throughout the community. The final print document usually takes a couple of weeks because Sandy has to send the PDF to the printer, and that takes a couple of weeks for the print document to come back. But the electronic copy is up, the first week of April.
Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, a solid 3 to 4 weeks in advance of the meeting.
Is that early enough for you, Steve, or do you feel like we should try to get that done earlier?
I don't have the answer, Brett.
Well, you had the question, so I thought you might have the answer.
I had the question.
So why don't you ask people or consider for yourself what the right amount of time would be, and we can try to accommodate that, right? Because that's the intent. I think part of it is perception. I think there's a lot of misperceptions out there, but you're asking a very clear question, and we would love to be able to get a very clear answer to make sure that we're meeting your expectations or the hypothetical expectations of the people that you are representing. Deb Amarelli had a great point in the chat, and I think we should note this, Derek, is sometimes some of this information is a little bit hard to find on the website. I don't know. So let's just make sure when we put something up in January that it's on the first page of the website. It says, hey, latest draft budget for 2022, whatever it is, so that it's not hard to find and it's right there in front of people, which you may have done last year. So if you have, great.
Yeah, no, we'll make sure that always happens. Good, that's a great suggestion. And I also say that Kelly and Sandy are working on a redesign of the website. So hopefully the
Great.
next website we have is more user friendly than we have now.
Good. Love it. Always getting better. All right, folks. Anything else before we open it up to public comment?
Nothing from me.
I have nothing.
Derek?
I have nothing else.
Okay, so just a reminder, I don't know if we'll have public comment or not, but just a reminder that if we do, the comments are limited to 5 minutes so that we can be respectful of everybody that may want to share some input. So any public comment from folks?
Right.
Yes? Go ahead.
Just keep in mind, I know the board has preached transparency and they want to check with everybody to make sure it's okay. But there's an analogy in baseball that when the manager starts listening to the fans, he's going to be, next thing is he's sitting with the fans. Okay? The Board of Selectmen is charged with being the chief administrative policy-making body of this town. And I think a lot of people expect that you will make these decisions on your own rather than checking with the inmates to see how the prison should be run. All right?
Did you just equate our voters to inmates, Paul?
I'm not equating the Board of Selectmen to the wardens either.
Yeah, good.
But let me back up. Derek had mentioned earlier about historical perspective, and that I can weigh in on that. That up until the last couple of years, or let me go back 20 years ago. You're worried about when the warrant has to be printed. Well, there were times when myself and other members of the finance committee at the time were knocking on the board we're sitting in the selectmen's room at 10 or 11 o'clock the night before the warrant is supposed to be printed. Okay, so it was pulling teeth to get stuff done. The boards at the time they'd hold things up for various and sundry reasons. Okay, with the advent of the town manager, this process has become much easier. Okay, as far as making this stuff available to the people, I think you're vastly mistaken as to how many people you think really can care about what's going on. All right, you look at the web page and see how many times the town meeting has been looked at. See how many times some of these Board of Selectmen's meetings are watched. Okay, the fact of the matter is, people don't care. All right, I've done this long enough. We've had meetings to explain the budget to people. Nobody went. Okay. When we did this 3 weeks ago, I believe I saw the number 27 there. And that was the most people that we had in the time I've been doing this. However, of those 27, I think 26 of them or 25 were all people who were involved in the process. They're all town department heads or town employees. Okay, so history tells me I can put more perspective on this than anybody else on this call. The people don't care, okay? They don't care till it gets to town meeting. And no matter how much information you put out there, how much earlier you put it out there, you're still going to get the same questions at town meeting, all right? With the advent of the town manager and Derek, things are there. You talked about earlier when the budget material was there. I believe we first saw it, or it was on the web the 25th of January, 26th of January, somewhere in there. It's out there, okay? Now, if you want to keep putting drafts of the warrant up there, that's one thing. But you keep in mind that I think there were 6 or 8 articles that were on the warrant, the original draft, that never made it to the final printing. Or they never made it to the final discussion. So, you know, I'm just saying that people really don't care. There may be 10 people that call you or Steve or Maureen or whatever it is. The vast majority of the people don't care until it gets to town meeting. I can't hear you, Brett. I see your lips moving.
Any other public comments?
I think you're muted, Brett.
Any other public comments? Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, you're delayed.
Any other public
Your
comments?
video and voice are delayed. I don't think there are any other public comments.
Okay. So with that, if you guys can hear me, if there are no other public comments, Derek, is there anything else that we need to cover?
No, this was the only agenda item.
Okay. All right. I will take a motion to adjourn. Great work, everybody. This was super helpful. I think we made a lot of great progress, lots of great planning, and appreciate everybody's engagement and openness to this. Thank you.
Thank
Make a motion
you.
to adjourn the meeting. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Thanks, folks. We'll see you later. Thanks again. Take care, folks.
You
Take care,
too.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Good night.